Hi, I'm Lila Gardunia and welcome to week 4 of the Hello Geese Quilt Along. Today we're continuing on. We're going to make our last set of the very smallest size geese. You can continue on using the stitch and flip method or the no waste method if you want, and that's fine, just same as all the other weeks. And if you need a recap video on that, you can look back to the week 2 video where I walk you through that step by step. But sometimes doing the smaller geese can get a little tricky. Like if you get off of it, it can make a bigger difference. I had already given 2 different ways of making things in the pattern, and it was just getting to be a lot of options. But so I didn't include a foundation paper piecing option is for the smallest geese, but if you want to, I've made some bonus foundations. So you can foundation paper piece them. This is a great way to make flying geese easily and super accurately. But if you're not familiar with it, I'm going to walk you through it. Let's get started. First step, you're going to want to download and print the bonus foundations. Do not print directly from the linked Google Drive file. It won't print to the right size. You need to download the file and then print from the downloaded file. When you press print, make sure of 2 things. Make sure it says printing at 100% and make sure there's no fit to size or fit setting. Make sure that's not clicked. We want it printing at 100%. Once you get it printed out, you're going to want to look at this little 1-inch square and measure it and make sure it's 1 inch. That way you can verify that it is in fact print to the correct size. There are these ones for the 2.5 by 2.5. There are these ones for the 2-inch tall geese, and then there are these little tiny geese for the 1-inch by 2-inch geese. So print both of those. You'll have to print, multiples, 4, 5, or 8, depending on the size of your quilt. Print those out, and then we're ready to go. So once you've printed it out, you'll notice that it says what pieces from the original cutting instructions not to cut, and then what to replace them with. Cut those. Okay, so I've got my foundation trimmed around it. I trimmed about 1/4 inch outside the outer line. And I've got my flying geese fabric. I took the square and cut it into quarters from corner to corner with my rotary cutter. And I've got my little background triangles. Cut the squares, cut them in half from corner to corner. It says for these sizes to cut the backgrounds at 3.5 inches, which is fine and works just fine. But if you're new to paper piecing, you might want to up it to 4 inches just to give yourself some wiggle room, and better to waste some fabric than have to unpick. Maybe, I don't know, depends on how you feel about it. So you might want to do that, but 3.5 should work fine. Just warning you, just in case. All right, so I've got this, got my fabric. You're also going to need some flathead pins, these little flathead pins, and or a little dab of glue stick. You'll need a small ruler. This is kind of a really small, but rotary cutter, and some sort of piece of cardstock, or I have a postcard that I'm using. So, step 1, let me turn the camera down so we can see everything. You'll notice that the foundations have numbers on them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That is the order we're going to foundation paper piece. What you do is you take your fabric, you turn over your foundation, and you put the first piece of fabric that I'm using for my geese over the spot that's labeled 1. You hold it up and look through it and make sure that it's covering the entire A1 area, and make sure it overlaps by at least 1/4 inch on all sides. Once you do that, you pin it in place. You might want to, especially if you're just starting out, pin it in multiple spots. If you do not have flathead pins, this is the point where you can use a little bit of glue stick and maybe just daub a little bit of glue underneath here so that it stays in place. Because what we're going to be doing, and why regular pins don't really work as well, is we're going to take, I'll get to why they don't work quite as well in just a second. We're going to take our card stock, or what's it called, postcard, and put it on the line, the solid line between section 1 and section 2. Put it on that line, and then we fold our paper back. Just fold it all the way like that. And then you're going to take your ruler and put the 1/4 inch line along the edge of the paper. So we're trimming off any excess fabric here. All right, it's a little tight in here. Works better when you're not filming. Okay, so trim off any extra. When you put your ruler down on top of it like that, if you have a ball head pin, it makes it tippy and it doesn't work very well. So that's why we don't want to use ball head pins. So, got this all done. Turn it over here. Got my perfect little straight edge there. And I'm going to put my little background triangle right sides together on top of the piece 1. And I'm gonna center it so it looks like it's gonna, when I sew it and flip it, it will cover the number 2 area. So this is why, especially if you're just doing it, you might want to cut your pieces just a hair bigger so that you don't have to stress too much about it being lined up right. Going to go ahead and pin this. If you're super confident and you've already foundation paper piece tons, you might be able to skip this, but this just keeps it all in place. Sometimes if you're piecing really big things, these can get flappy when we turn the foundation over to sew, so you might even want to, or if you're just starting out, add another couple. You know, can never have too many pins. All right, what we're gonna do next is we're gonna take this foundation over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this line. We're gonna start about a 1/2 inch before the start of the section between 1 and 2. We're gonna start right about here. I'm just gonna, just a second, I'm gonna grab my pen here. So we're gonna start about here. We're gonna sew, you can kind of see the fold here. We'll sew along that fold. We'll hit this line, sew along the line, and then keep going into the seam allowance. This little section is where the seam allowance will be. Into the seam allowance, and then beyond it, probably stop about there. To prep your sewing machine, you're going to want to decrease the stitch length from what you usually have it. I usually have it at about a 2, and I like to go down to like a 1.6, 1.5-ish. 1.5 is really hard to unpick if you have to, but it makes it really easy to tear off out the papers when you're done. So you do what you need to do. Okay, I'm gonna kind of smooth this so maybe you can see. I'm just going to start sewing right here and end right there. Let me do that. You don't need to, and then just sometimes it's nice to kind of peek, make sure nothing's gotten, none of the pieces have moved around, but we really pinned it as well, so it should be fine. So I'm just gonna start sewing, and if you want to, you can take out my pin there. If you get off just a little bit, it's not actually that big of a deal, and don't freak out. Just go slowly, surely along that line. as you do it more and more, you'll get more used to it. So I sewed along that line, starting a little before, ending a little bit after. And now look, I can flip that open. And, darn it, I forgot to preheat the iron. All right, so the next step, let me kind of move over here. All right, I can take these pins out because this is pretty much in place. So that's kind of it. So I'm just gonna press this. I'm gonna wait for my iron to preheat. Let's pretend I pressed this. It looks all great. I hold it up to the light and make sure that this piece covers this whole A2 place and extends at least 1/4 of an inch. And it does, but it is a little tight. I might actually do it. So pretend I pressed this. The next step is just to repeat the process on the next section. We did 1, 2, now we're going to go to 3. I take my card and I fold it over. I trim this little bit to 1/4 of an inch. And then I just heard my iron beep, so I can press this now. All right, so we're pressing this down, boom. Your iron's not gonna burn your paper unless you totally, I don't know, just leave it on there. So don't worry about that. Pressed. So press, trim. Gonna put our next piece right, so you can kind of put it like there, go, okay, that's where I want it. Flip it. Pin it. And then move on over to the sewing machine. Start sewing a little bit before the line and keep sewing past it. Just pausing to take out the pin. Okay, that's kind of awkward. Usually don't pin tons, but I'm trying to be a good example. All right, sew. So past the line. And there we go. So that side. So in here, got my little guy. Flip him open. Grab my pressing mat. You'd have all this set up somewhere else, but we're just doing this on the fly. I'm gonna do one more section to show you how to kind of move into the next section, and you just repeat these steps the whole way. So we've done 1, 2, 3, now we're gonna do 4. I just take my card and I fold it up. Now you notice you're like, my fabric gets sticking to the paper. That's fine. That's how it's supposed to be. You just kind of carefully take the paper, the fabric I mean, and you just pull it out. And that's fine. So you see this is a little tight. Yeah, I'd up it. I'm sorry, guys. Up it a little bit. Cut those at 4 inches. All right, just trim that off so it's nice and even. Looking good. Take my next geese piece. I'm gonna want it right there. So I center it, flip it over, over to the sewing machine. And I'm gonna start sewing past the seam allowance and end past the seam allowance. And yeah, I just sewed over my pins. Oh well, whatever. Okie doke. So here we go. Here's my next little geese ready to go. Everything's matching all nice. It's perfect. You'll just keep adding geese on until you've completed everything. You'll have all these loose little edges and it will be extending past what you want it to be. So when you get this whole thing done, you're going to want to grab your ruler. Here we go. And you'll just put your ruler along the edge. And what I find works best, instead of trying to line up the outer edge of the ruler with this dotted edge, that can sometimes be hard to see. I like to line up the 1/4 inch mark on my ruler with this inner solid line. So I just go like that. And then just take my rotary cutter and just trim it up. And then you'll have a nice section of flying geese, all already pre-sewn into a row. And then you'll take your spacer strips and sew them to either side, just like normal. Once these are sewn to the side, you can go ahead and remove the papers. So to remove the papers, it's really easy. I'm just gonna take this out. It shouldn't hurt the foundation any, but you just rip it like that and it just comes right out. And you've got your little flying geese strip. So that is it. I also, if you want this all written out so you can refer back to it, I also have a blog post, a How to Foundation Paper Piece blog post that I'll link to in the notes below. And let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to help. Or you can just piece them the regular way. It doesn't matter, whatever you want to try. This is kind of fun. It's easy. It's foolproof. There's no messing up. If you do mess up, you can just unpick it. It's kind of a pain, but or you could start over. Whatever. So that's it. We're just making the 2 sets of the very smallest geese, and then next week we're gonna sew it together and you'll be done. And it's already so it's already so close to being done. All we've got to do is sew our blocks together into columns and then sew those columns together. Easy peasy. You've done the majority of the work at this point. So we're just in the home stretch, which is awesome. And for the sponsor, I'm sponsoring the prize this week. If you post a picture on Instagram with the hashtag #HelloGeeseQuiltAlong by next Thursday, you'll be entered to win a $25 Etsy gift card. So you can use it on another foundation paper piece pattern, one of my patterns, a pair of earrings, whatever you want. I'm so glad you guys have been sewing along with me. This has been really fun. So if you want a foundation paper piece these, give it a try. And I hope you have an awesome week, and I'll pop in next week and we'll put this quilt together. All right, thanks. Bye.